Welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed your break. Now, I'd make a bet that many of you will have, in the future, after our next presentation, very different thoughts when watching ants carrying food from A to B. Because among other things, you will now hear in our next presentation that the behavior of ants actually has a lot to do with the way you do business, or at least some of you do business. There are people out there, not just thousands, millions, who act just like ants. They share cumulative wisdom and thereby heavily challenge the way some of you do business. New technologies provide them with tools to identify, for instance, the best investor. Too bad if it isn't you. However, the good news is there are also technological tools that allow you to decipher these online swarms, condense widespread digital wisdom and discussions, provide you with a competitive advantage over someone you might not even have identified yet as a competitor. The speaker who will tell you all about it is founder and CEO of Complexium. The company's products and services combine network analysis as well as computer linguistics and semantic methods. To date, him and his team have advised a number of international companies on the fields of marketing, communication, and employer branding. He's also honorary professor at the Universität der Künste, University of Arts in Berlin, as well as a lecturer at the Institute for Competitive Intelligence. We are pleased to get lots of intelligent insights now from Professor Dr. Martin Grothe. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this great introduction, and thank you for the opportunity here to share some thought with you. In fact, I have to admit, I just used this break for starting with my digital diet. I think it was very impressive to start the morning with these ideas. And I didn't check my emails, for instance. So I think that this issue digital diet is extremely important. It's not kind of nice to know, and that we've seen even the first glimpses of the rise of technology. There's so much more to come that we have no chance to barely survive without any rules. And I think your question concerning these rules was excellent, because if we don't change only on our individual behavior, but rules in a community or in an enterprise are changed, then the whole effectiveness of such an organization might rise. In fact, we call a phenomenon like this swarm intelligence. It's not that, for instance, these fish guys here are all oriented towards the sun, but they all obey certain rules, an extremely simple set of rules to produce collective behavior. Not even the ants, of course. This is the next step towards lunch. But even, for instance, fish, they have 3 rules. Just let me enumerate them. First is, just use the same heading than your neighbors. And swim at almost the same velocity than your neighbors and avoid collision. You need these 3 rules in the water or even in the Bahnhofstraße to produce some kind of swarm behavior. We'll go deeper in this talk. But there's a clear evidence or a relation between individual rules of behavior and collective performance. Without individual rules, your collective performance won't be that great. So this is my very small agenda. Yes, we learned something about ants, how they collectively manage to get the shortest path to their food resources. And then we'll transfer these ideas to your industry, to the finance industry. Of course, only on a very simplistic level, but even these simplistic models are very powerful. And playing with the title of this day, the Revolution Day or the Evolution Day, I'd like to point out two perspectives, two different kind of developments. First of all, the evolutionary perspective. This is incremental. It's pretty easy, even on a short distance, to assess, to get to know the next upcoming events. The revolution is another perspective, because there we have disruptive effects, something with surprise, something being totally new. And I'd like to show that the evolution in this technology field, these new platforms, especially in the finance sector, will pose an enormous and dramatic challenge to the industry, to the professional financial services, because it's extremely hard to be constantly better than a well-organized swarm. It's almost impossible on a longer perspective. But of course, there are some other technologies being able to provide you with a kind of disruptive power, being smarter or a little bit earlier than the swarm. We bring this together. So there's a danger, but hope. Yes, one hint to the kind of technology which is my home turf. In fact, it's about 10 years swarm intelligence, but in the practical scene, swarm intelligence sounds a little bit like theory. In fact, what we do is social web analytics. Use not just counting articles and stuff like this, but we have developed tools who decipher the content of the discussions out there. And we employed this, as has been said in the introduction, in the fields of marketing, for instance, and employer branding, and to a growing extent in the sector of corporate security. In this sector, getting early signals of possible dangers, we're working for several well-known financial institutions in this wonderful city and in Frankfurt. But these tools have never been applied to raw financial data, so they are not an expert. So let's look at your business. The answers come later on. So in a very simplistic way, an investor and financial advisor formulating recommendations or designing financial products has to do with uncertainty. If there would be no uncertainty, you could calculate everything and no decision would be necessary. Thank God there's uncertainty. But your daily task is at least to deal with this uncertainty. And going a little bit deeper, trying to structure uncertainty or the unknown, we can look at this small portfolio with this, not in this specific design, but in the pattern, going back to a statement of former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, where he introduced the notion of unknown unknowns. He was a little bit laughed about this because what are unknown unknowns? I don't know this. But this is the real blind spot. This is a real important issue. For instance, an investor X has certain issues in which he knows, but you don't know the exact status, for instance. That are the things we could plug in, for instance, in a search engine. I'm looking for company X, for a product Z. Things you know, you don't know. It's very easy to find this information because we have an enormous amount of resources. We have a tsunami of information. Selection is the key message, the key challenge. But this is different. It's hardly possible to use a search engine, this Google, of course, this window, and plug in, please show me what is important, but I don't know yet. Show me the new issues. Of course, there is a kind of tool to reduce this lack of information. See what your colleagues are doing, what are they looking for, what are they posting, to get new ideas. But it's not digging in this real unknown field. And we'll discuss both of them. And as I said before, the evolutionary part, finding known unknowns, will become the major challenge for your industry. But a way to boost your business is about here. So how we can organize surprises? We'll see just in a second. I start with this evolutions. Maybe one or two of you have already ideas what kind of new platforms do emerge where we find new kind of financial data. And this is kind of an evolutionary process because people start since several years to share their private information. My friends, my hobbies, my music, my locations, my everything. This has been unknown 10 years ago, but now this transparency increases dramatically. And I show an example on the next slide. There are even guys or private persons or professional investment guys sharing their investment decisions on a public basis. In fact, if I remember my own investment decisions, I would have done everything but not shared them. It's not my field of expertise. But who of you, perhaps you would like to give me a sign, knows the platform Sharewise? Sharewise. Okay, then this day is about sharing, and then I think it's very important to have a look on this platform, Sharewise, because this is a relatively new platform in which professionals, but private users too, can register and recommend certain financial products or stocks. Okay, that's nice. But the platform goes one step further. All these recommendations are evaluated. And this is very clever, because then the individual user, whether he's registered under his full name or as Peter Pan 42, doesn't matter, gets some kind of skill level according to the recommendations he's introduced into the system. And of course, this is not only consumer-to-consumer stuff, where they speculate how well Siemens will perform, but many of them also incorporate the recommendations they get from their financial advisors. And please think one step further. Some financial advisors works some kind of recommendation plan for a wealthy person. This guy introduces this in this Sharewise, and then he's going to the ranking and realizes that this recommendation maybe ranks number 3015. And there are thousands of other professional or private users having a better performance. So we'll take this ranking information to the next meeting with this advisor. So this is a very, very simple platform, very, very simple rules. Register, give recommendations, find an evaluation, give a rank. And of course, it's not unimportant for the registered users to get a good reputation, to get a good rank. Gamification, for instance. There are two platforms in the US, whether it's Covesta and Wealthfront, I go one step further. I have the ranking, and maybe I realize, Peter Pan 42 has a pretty good result. with these recommendations, with this portfolio, why not just subscribe his decisions? Why not just rebuild his portfolio? Of course, a bank is incorporated in this process, and buy the same shares or financial products than he does. So you can have a mechanism to filter out best of crowd investors, as they are called on this platform, and then you can subscribe their decisions. And they're in a swarm process derived from thousands of other recommendations, and each one is not formulated just for a joke, but each one is really trying to be top of the list. So we have a very, very interesting mechanism to produce good forecasts, to provide good reputation. And I would recommend just to you have a look at this platform, and maybe your recommendation when you're in this business or other known recommendations are incorporated in this platform. So you have no decision to take part or not. We talk to many companies that thinking, oh, this social media, nice stuff. We're just discussing whether our company should take part or not. This is time wasting. No company, no professional person has the ability to decide not to take part, unless he's not extremely uninteresting. So if you are interchanging, or if you're object to public discussion, then you are part of these platforms. You are part of the open discussion in the social web. And if you can't decide not to be a part, then of course it's, according to me, very important to learn how you're assessed. What are the notions about your performance? This is ShareWise. Another example, which is not going that far, which is not a little bit early in its development, is the platform WIKIRATING, or similar WikiInvest. Here people share their views concerning financial products, concerning countries, concerning enterprises, investment items. And the intention is to generate some kind of rating. Of course, this is not Moody's or Standard & Poor's, and it's a very early experiment, but people come together and share their views in a very structured way. Cumulative wisdom comes to existence. And similar to this, here, people share their views. There are, of course, platforms, I'm sure you know, things like CrowdInvest, crowdfunding, but people come together to share their money. Nowadays, primarily to assist some seed stage enterprise, but this is only the very first phase of CrowdInvest. In Germany, there are several platforms, in Switzerland too, US the same. This is a very growing phenomenon. And of course, one can say, okay, this is only for very, very small amounts of money, for companies which are not yet very important. But according to me, thinkable that even larger companies might use this instrument if the routines, if the procedures are fixed for project financing, if they have a clear defined goal. Oh, we want to install a new wind energy park in the North Sea and need $5 trillion. This instrument may be used to gather the attention of many enthusiasts and collect their money. So there's another challenge to many aspects of professional business. In which direction is this heading? So we have three main ingredients. We have transparency. Transparency about individual portfolio strategies. Transparency about the most forward thinking of financial institutions. We have evaluation, and we have this subscription mechanism, which is, I think, very powerful and will be a very intense challenge to those guys being not able to permanently outpace the crowd, which is difficult. But of course, one has to say that all these companies, and we've seen that you don't know them, they have not yet a real high level of importance. Their reach is very limited. But it's there. They're progressing, they're gaining attention. The number of registered users is increasing heavily. So you should have this in mind. You should, sorry, but this is against your diet. You should take this on your schedule to regularly monitor what's happening with share-wise, for instance. How are our ratings, our recommendations rated on this platform? Okay, yes, now we have seen some new technology platforms, but my aim is to explain how these function. And so I come back to this ARN stuff. Here we have the wood floor, here's the nest, and the different ARNs are running out seemingly randomly. And as a collective, they found the shortest route toward the food. And as I said before, this is completely managed by each ARN following, in this case, 3 different rules. Like here, bring food to the hive, follow the strongest pheromone track. The ants distribute pheromones if they walk through the floor, and these pheromones accumulate, and the area with the strongest taste is the most attractive route for ants. Of course, there's a kind of depreciation that is taste vanishes, but this works unless it rains. So this is a very powerful principle, and please keep in mind that human engineers have a totally different strategy. They mostly go top down, starting from a goal and then coming to the detailed task. Nature, in its processes to generate very complex behavior, goes the other way around. So if you generate a platform, there are 2 approaches. The human engineering approach, define a complex goal. We want the best investor. How do we do this? Or even another one, the more swarm-like approach, to define rules of behavior according to the digital diet rules, intelligence rules maybe. What kind of rules lead community platforms to success? We've seen how fish and how ants proceed to their goals. I've here enumerated some rules, some strategies for community building. To build a good community, in brackets, online or offline, it's the same principle. It has nothing to do with technology. All these 9 items are very important, but I would like to stress only these 3, because all these platforms allow users to build up very meaningful profiles. For instance, with your skill level concerning investment strategies. This is very important to foster communication on this technical platform, because it's very very disturbing, very distressing to communicate with the person and being not able to memorize something. Because if you're meeting him the second time and starting again from Adam and Eve, it's very difficult to achieve a high level of communication, to achieve a high level of trust. But if you have a meaningful profile, it's easier to build trust on a platform. And the more trust people perceive on a platform, the more information, bless you, the more information they provide openly. So you need profiles and you need roles. For example, you are the master investment guru or you're the newbie at the platform. It's very important to work with these registered users differently, to introduce some kind of tension that everybody, of course, wants to become the master investment guru. So there's an additional pressure to improve your own engagement. Maybe some of you knew this from eBay. When you start at eBay, you have these sunglasses indicating that you are totally newbie. Nobody will trust you. And then you get more stars and sometimes diamonds, so your level of trust increases. Different roles. It's a very easy mechanism to foster the identification of registered users with a platform. And this is easy and this is efficient. Define some kind of leadership roles on this platform, maybe being responsible for certain issues, because this reduces the amount of work you have to do to maintain such a platform. And people, users having a role, having status, are more engaged to make marketing and to bring more effort in your community. So there are very simple rules, nothing to do with social media or stuff like this, about with other pictures, 100 years sociologically, how to form a certain group. And this is now transferred to internet platforms. And I've started to play around with these ideas. What about this evolution? What might be the next step? Because we've seen we have platforms like Sharewise being very intelligently designed, but have very small reach. What would you do if such a thing would happen? FaceBank, of course, Google Plus is also possible to enter this business. But here we have a community in which users are used to share everything. Why not just incorporate a section, My Investments? Many of them won't hesitate to introduce their, maybe not the amount, but the type of financial product they've bought, or the type of industry they trust. Of course, not for complex products, very specific situations, but more on the retail level, of course. This is mainly retail or very simplistic financial products. And this platform has about, however you define a user, about 1.3 billion users. If you just get 1% or 1 promille users per month using this service, then this will be an extremely performant mechanism to bring transparency to financial advisory. I don't know when this will happen or whether it will this corporate color, but I can't imagine that this idea won't take place in the near future. It's too easy to find a bank to allow the process. Yes, I see this user, high performance level, subscribe his decisions in real time. And this is, for many investors, extremely attractive to delegate the personal investment decisions not to an advisor, but maybe to my group of friends or to the always subscribe the user scoring best and having the same interests in hobbies and films like me, who are similar to me, and they must be a friend of Greenpeace, for instance. Very easy. So I think this, a service like this, a clear evolution, this is not a revolution, it's an evolutionary step, will be quite a drama for a wide range of professional financial services. Later on, I'd really like to hear your comments on this, whether you have anticipated all this, or Google is working on this, or whether your recommendations are always much better than the market. Let's see. But, of course, this is only the evolutionary part. But there's one more thing. We've talked so far only about these well-structured new platforms with a very limited reach, small islands of financial expertise. But I would recommend you to broaden your scope, to go beyond these few islands and have a look at this left thing, the unstructured social web. And I would like to share here some insights and some screens we're doing just in a project with Oracle. It was just decided that all these discussions in these different forums concerning software and hardware and which CRM system to buy are of high relevance for their lead generation. But how to listen, how to structure, because the classical search engines don't help. So this is my revolutionary introduction, or showcase what happens. So the unstructured social web offers an enormous plentifulness of statements, questions, comments, and of course, rubbish and spam, and 90% you should not use and spend your time. But it's, the worth is too high to neglect this. Because the structured playground will be dominated by swarm wisdom. The unstructured one may give you an advantage with specific tools. Unfortunately, there do not exist many tools dealing with this unstructured, these unknown unknowns. We don't know what happens there. We have maybe a notion that there are 50 or 100 different financial discussion forums, but what are the issues around there? Let's have a look. This is an example screenshot from this tool we developed for Oracle tool. And these computer linguistic methods, I don't want to explain here unless you ask. They generate not the most mentioned terms out of an enormous mass of documents, but these terms and issues being mentioned more than usual. So in computer linguistics, for each language, each term has a characteristic normal level. And if this is increased, then this indicates clearly, oh, some users are discussing about X, Y, Z. And this system produces some kind of map, maybe a semantic map, collecting these different issues out of a wide range of thousands of different articles. So the analyst, or the Oracle lead generator, gets an overview. What's going on? What is my target group discussing right now? And not even this. The unstructured discussions may be transformed with new technology to some kind of ranking on a daily basis or hourly basis, what are the top items discussed right now? And of course, if this is automatically generated and language is a very, very fluid construct, there's some rubbish in this. So the analyst is still needed to interpret these data. But it's possible to structure all these decentralized wisdom. This can be ranked, can be clustered. The system compares the frequency distribution of different issues over the set of documents and builds automatically clusters over all these thousands of documents. What is belonging together? And if the analyst want to deep dive, if he has spotted, for instance, one term which sounds interesting, just give this a click. This is German, I have to admit. But for instance, the analyst has chosen that database is an important issue. Then the system collects all these text snippets from the document base and presents, right in the middle database, the left and the right context, so the analyst can very, very fast realize how the crowd, the decentralized crowd, not on one platform but on many, is thinking or is discussing databases. What aspects are important? Are there new insights? Where to deep dive, going directly to the discussion? Maybe discussions about some financial products or some about companies being in focus right now. Does it make sense somehow? Okay, nobody leaves the room, so I think so. Then I can dare to present you this slide. This is hard stuff. Because with this slide, I'd like to compare the work of ants with this method to extract, how we call it, social big data insights. It's only an illustration, of course. Illustration. So on one side, we have the walks of the ants over the wood floor. And they distribute these pheromones. So they're through these hundreds and thousands of walks, we see the come to existence and distribution of pheromones in the landscape. Parts which have a higher and a more intense smell than others. And on the other side, maybe posts. There are thousands of single posts stressing one or different topics. And they are cumulated too. And the normal level is taken away, so we get a distribution, a heat map, if you want to, of the content concerning a certain area. So exactly the same principle, and the analyst or the ant gets the map over the wood floor concerning the pheromone distribution, and the maybe financial analyst gets an overview of the important issues, the emerging topics, without having looked through them concerning industry, corporate environment, or some other financial areas. Coming to the final round, but one or two things still to share. For instance, if there is a kind of analyst having the task to assess a company, how's the new strategy of Siemens going on? Then he, of course, collects all this financial data, which is extremely important, but a total different area. But he can also, maybe based on a tool like a balanced scorecard, collect information concerning different angles. Oh, hello Siemens, you're telling me that your new products are real excellent and they excel the competition. But I learn from the marketplace, from price and from a comparison with competing products, that there might be problems with your products. I ask the company, oh, I learned there are problems. Or in the process area, maybe, oh, I just learned that you have problems in the delivery process or that you have problems to maintain a high service level. Please explain this to me. In fact, a method like this is used heavily in the field of competitive intelligence, where companies use this kind of listening in learning the weak spots of their competitor. Listening to their competitors' customers gives you insights whether they're good or not in relation to your own performance. Or even, which is gaining, especially in Germany, where we have a so-called war for talent, extremely important, is the company able to attract enough skilled people? Oh, you're telling me you're going to build up these new wind energy parks in the north in the Baltic Sea. But is it guaranteed that you are able to attract enough engineers? Interesting, we got the task from E.ON, a German energy enterprise, to try to find some kind of engineers for these wind energy parks within the net. Where are they? Where is this target group? What issues do they discuss? And how is it possible for us, for the company, to get involved with them? How to get their attention? So, again, the Rumsfeld matrix, telling us that in this field, the known unknowns, it might become, maybe not now, maybe not in 3 years, but maybe in 5 years, extremely hard to stay in the game if you're a financial advisors giving investment recommendations. Because the crowd with these simple rules have very powerful mechanisms to produce and to challenge your recommendations. The revolution doesn't work there. The evolution aspect. But in this field, it will be possible to be open to work with new technology tools. You've seen one example, but maybe there are others, to try to figure out how can you use this social media or this overall digital sphere to uncover unknown unknowns. This is not easy. But being more concrete, the part or the emerging task for the investment community would be at least to track these new platforms. And of course, to use these platforms, why not, to collect the information about your, let's call it watch list, things you already know. What's WIKIRATING telling about the political situation in Azerbaijan? Don't know. Use this. But try to do some experiments, broaden your scope in this unstructured field. I know this is not sexy. And almost all discussion boards, bulletin boards, they look awful. So we have some kind of the hybrid user, buying the smartest smartphones, using apps only if they're hyper cool. But bulletin boards, discussion forums, where you can find information, they're not sponsored, there are very few ads. They can look boring. But there, they give room for the individual users to build up a reputation. You always find this kind of stars or other symbols. And this is a real pool for information, at least to realize what the crowd is thinking. Maybe you have a better information, but what the public opinion, or part of the public opinion concerning certain issues. And we just learned it's not the fact how things really are. It's additionally very important to realize how people think things are. You have to know these discussions. But these two steps, this is the easy part, the very easy part. It's about tools. It's about checking the development of some platforms. How's the number of users developing, for instance? Are they better than we are? This is easy. You don't have to move. You have to learn some new tools, for instance. But the real revolution is not online. The real revolution is not in the investor's toolbox. But the real revolution will take in-house. It's a fact we just realize in many HR departments, even of very famous companies. They're used to collect the applications and then invite the young guys for their talks. Well, this has changed dramatically. They have to go out, of course, listen to these discussions, take part in these discussions, engage in this playing field in which the target group is active. And maybe this is a kind of revolution which might have some relevance for certain sectors of the finance industry. If you're listening to discussions concerning the product performance of company X, and if this is important for your recommendations, for your forecast toward this company, to know how consumers or business customers like their products, you can listen, of course, and draw your interpretations, but it's too easy to engage in these discussions, to ask a question. How do you like this kind of tools in comparison to X? Oh, I'm very interested I'm just comparing these two industries or these two products. So we see a kind of 4 steps of an increasing engagement level. And of course, not everybody has to climb up to the highest engagement level. But I think it's absolutely mandatory to listen to the stuff which happens outside in relation to your business. This is maybe cruel to your digital diet, but there are tools to select, to filter this buzz. And in many occasions, it will be very interesting to participate, to respond to a question. Even perhaps if you're looking for new clients, don't neglect this fact. And this is the Oracle approach. Okay, there are the guys having problems with their databases, which ERP systems. Okay, Oracle has to learn how to engage, how to enter such an online discussion. And this is quite different from proclaiming we are the market leader by our products. People outside online don't like a behavior like this. You have to talk, you have to communicate on one level. Companies have not learned this. It's a very interesting process. React to interesting insights, or even just next level, start new discussions on your own. And of course, higher level use this. This is maybe the crowd approach, to employ the crowd, somehow smart, for your own targets, for your own goals. How to use this power for your approach. Therefore, in history, there have been processes to use the distributed computer power for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI. Use computer power. But now it's time to use the distributed intelligence for your own goals. And in fact, we're doing this listening project with Oracle, and this whole process, how to enter this social business, is not about, hey, let's start up a new Facebook page and let's count our fans. It's about how to measure, how to control this new social business. It's totally new. And this is another project together with SAP to design a kind of software solution for social business controlling. We are hopefully going to present a solution in March at the CeBIT that we will call, this is the speech, this is not creation but boost. Because we think that being on this revolutionary side of technology will not be a nice to have, but it will be mandatory, will be the potential to boost your overall business. Belongs for very many different industries, but to a certain extent even to the finance industries. So what we see is not a hype, it won't go away. It will go from the desktop computers to your wristwatch, but you have to discuss these ideas, check share-wise, and yes, my task was, my idea was to present these thoughts to you. I really would like to discuss questions right now or even in the afternoon, and think about when we go to lunch in a couple of minutes, how the aunts would do it. And think about your digital diet. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. So does anyone want to give feedback? Does anyone disagree or have a question? We have a question here. Yeah, the lady here in the fifth. Could you bring it?
Oh, yeah.
1 second, yeah.
I see a lot of the social web utilization in terms of investment information at the moment as a reaction to over-regulation of the financial markets. But the problem surely is, how do you get sufficient regulation to protect users of these sites at the same time? And how do you balance some regulation with indeed the transparency that you applaud on these sites?
I hope you don't expect a complete answer to this, but we've been talking here about the corporate view on this. I think this is the easy part. If we have the information tsunami, which is now available for the consumers, ranging from very professional to very poor information, this is quite more demanding. But I'm quite reluctant to hope that pure regulation will solve this problem. It's a learning process which never ends on the consumer side, and only if the law is broken, then of course. But there will be always some a very grey part of information offerings. So I think consumers will more trust information offerings on platforms they already know. They've already established a high level of trust concerning Google Plus and other communities. So I think the probability that financial add-ons will enrich these platforms is very high.
Any other questions? Well, picking up on this, though, what about the credibility of these recommendations and of these ratings? Of course, they can probably just as easily be manipulated as other things. Like people can write their own recommendations for their books on Amazon, not implying that you did it, but I know people who did, or ask friends just to give good recommendations. What about investment decisions?
Yes, here if somebody recommends a certain share, of course you can see afterwards how good this recommendation was. Is the share increased, for instance, or not? So there's a kind of regulation after the recommendation, and this allows the different users to build up a very valid skill level or reputation in these platforms.
But it's based on trust. There's no control as such, no regulation. It's basically built on trust and on feedback, like on eBay.
Yes, we see it in many different areas that people tend to believe recommendations from other persons if this is not a very market-driven recommendation, if they have the feeling that this is an authentic person, that maybe they have had the same problems before. Okay, he's thought about my problem, giving me this advice. This is interesting. And this makes it very difficult for companies to learn to take part in these discussions.
Yeah, and in that context, perhaps my next question, you explained how ants decide their route. It depends on the pheromones that are left behind, on the strongest smell or strongest taste. Now, we don't leave pheromones, at least not on the digital, not on the web. So how do we know, how do people know whom to follow? How are these opinion leaders be built? Does it only depend on the quantity of posts? The more posts, like the bigger the chance of becoming an opinion leader, or are there other things that decide this?
It depends from platform to platform. On these platforms like Sharewise, if a user has a history of good recommendations, I assume that his newest recommendations are also valid. For example, another platform, eBay, if one has already made 500 auctions and has good evaluations, he might be serious.
I just see we have another question. If the microphone could please be brought there.
Do you think it's possible to identify the origins of people's opinions? You know, if you're counting the number of times an idea is referenced, it could just be because it came from a very dominant source in the first place. For example, a TV news article, and suddenly people are regurgitating it verbatim as if it was their own opinion. When what you really want to get to is the person that created the original article that provoked and generated the broader view of what...
Yes, it can be tracked where the content of a very prominent post comes from, whether there's been some kind on TV or newspaper, just jumped to the digital sphere. This can be tracked. And of course it can be judged who's following whom, who is responding to a certain post. And this relates also to the question who to follow, to this guys producing enormous amount of posts. No, this would be too easy, but how many fans or followers do they have? How many reactions do they receive? If somebody is producing many posts or recommendation, but nobody is responding, then perhaps you better neglect him. So there are, in this network give us a whole bunch of structures which can be calculated with mathematical algorithms to sort out those guys only writing for marketing.
Anyone else? There's another question.
Yes, I'm a bit confused, I must confess. You pointed out that one cannot consistently beat the market, or it's rather difficult to beat the market consistently. So let's say the best route set by the pheromones or whatever will be the market, meaning the persons who make predictions will be beating the markets some of the time, and the ones who beat the market most, on average, over a long time, will just fare as good as the market. So I'm not quite sure I understand what one can achieve in the long run with something like share-wise.
Great question.
Yes, what can we achieve? There we have to look at this Sharewise portal from different perspectives, for instance. As a user, it's a very, I think, a very attractive way as a normal consumer user or normal private investor to delegate my investment decisions. If the platform has enough reputation, is crowded, and is collecting enough recommendations to have a fairly good investment strategy. And from the professional service side, I think it's important to take this as an at least additional data in the whole puzzle of information collection to see how the crowd is evaluating Siemens, for example. And if you are in the situation that you publish forecasts or recommendations by yourselves, it's highly probable that these forecasts are incorporated in this platform so that you are, whether you want it or not, are in competition with the crowd, with other investors, and that you customers might realize this and compare your forecast, your recommendations with other ones.
So it's partly a self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment I have a certain amount of credibility, lots of people are going to follow me, and thereby the stock is necessarily going to rise.
It's maybe a good idea to build a high reputation on these platforms, if they're grown up sometimes. But the phenomenon is still in place, it works, but the reach, of course, is limited. It's growing.
Very interesting stuff. Anyone else? Okay, we can deepen the discussion later on in our roundtable this afternoon. For now, thank you very much, Professor Grothe.
Thank you.
Well, and after all this brain food, it's now time for some real food, time for lunch. Remember what you just heard. It can be very valuable to share knowledge, so you can do so, meet new people offline. This is also what this day is about. And we are going to reconvene in exactly 1 hour at 1 p.m. to hear and to welcome 2 more speakers you don't want to miss. Until then, enjoy your break.